Hey everyone, it's Davicab here. A couple of days ago I posted a video of May gameplay, and at the beginning of that video you can hear me sort of complaining to my brother, or get kind of salty about Zarya. And people in the comments were misunderstanding why I was getting salty. Some people thought that I had just died, and so I was getting frustrated about that. Some people thought I was complaining about her range. But to be honest, the real reason is that I've got some more sort of deeper fundamental issues with Zarya, and so sometimes I just get really salty about Zarya and rant about it. To explain my problem with Zarya, I'm going to make a bold assertion. I believe, personally, that Zarya is the worst designed character in the game. And that's probably going to come off as really like whiny or critical or negative to a lot of people, but it's really not meant that way. I mean, there are 23 characters. Logically, there's going to be a best designed character and there's going to be a worst designed character. And if you asked every single person who plays Overwatch to pick a worst designed character, they would, they'd be able to pick one. So, I'm not really trying to bash on Blizzard. I just think that of all the characters, for me, the one that they designed the worst is Zarya. And I think that I have a fairly well-reasoned and logical explanation for why that's the case. So I wanted to share that with you and get your thoughts on it. Now, before I get into it, I wanted to be somewhat objective and balanced and talk a little bit about the things that I like about Zarya that I think that Blizzard did really well. For one, her gun is awesome. Her left click and right click both feel awesome. They look cool. I think the blue, pink, purple color palette that they gave her is really cool. I like that they have a female tank. That's kind of hard to do. They also really nailed that with D.Va. I like her ultimate. Her ultimate's one of the coolest and most original mechanics in the game. I'm not particularly a big fan of her Russian bodybuilder setup, but that's not really important to my argument. And I think her range is a little bit long for a tank, but if Blizzard thinks that there should be a tank who's really effective at medium and can do long range stuff, then that's fine. I don't have an issue with that. So, in my opinion, the problem with Zarya is that she violates one of the core fundamental principles in Overwatch. That principle is the concept of countering and counterplay. Every character in the game has a reliable counter. Every ability in the game has a reliable counter. However, Zarya's bubble does not have a reliable counter, and therefore Zarya does not have a reliable counter. In fact, to illustrate this point, I created a spreadsheet where I wrote down every single normal ability in the game. By normal ability, I mean a non-ultimate. Ultimates are kind of a special case, so I'm not going to focus on those. And the bubble is non-ultimate, so it fits in that category. Anyways, I wrote down every ability and named a counter for that ability, or if it doesn't have a counter, a weakness of that ability. So for example, Tracer's Blink is countered by the Junkrat Trap. Also, Genji's Dash is now countered by the Junkrat Trap as well. Reinhardt's shield has the weakness of being vulnerable from behind, so a flanker can get behind Reinhardt and harass him while his shield is up. That's a weakness of the ability. Some abilities don't have direct weaknesses, they can't be countered or stopped. An example would be Torbjorn's armor or Mei's ice block. So you can't stop those from going off, but they do have weaknesses built in. So for example, Torbjorn's armor requires scrap to work. So first you have to get a kill, and then after you get the kill you have to put yourself in a potentially vulnerable situation to go get the scrap and then give it to an ally. Similarly, Mei's ice block can't be stopped or prevented, but while you're healing inside the ice block, you can't move or attack, so you leave yourself vulnerable to counterplay. You can get surrounded. It's just, it's definitely got a built-in weakness. Zarya's bubble has no weakness. Zarya's bubble has no counter. There's nothing in the game that you can do to prevent an enemy from bubbling. There's absolutely nothing. I mean, you could sort of say Mei's ice wall to sort of separate Zarya from the target, but that's only on the projected barrier, and you certainly can't use it to prevent the Zarya from shielding herself. So first off, there's nothing you can do to prevent a barrier. At most, you could say that you could Mei ice wall, but even that's not very reliable, and it only protects against, the targets behind the ice wall. The Zarya could shield other targets as well. She could also shield herself. That doesn't prevent the personal shield. Once it's up, the only way you can get rid of the shield is by damage. And we're talking a lot of damage, 200 damage over 2 seconds. A lot of characters in the game just can't really do that, especially when you take headshots out of the equation. And on top of that, the character whose shield is going to be moving around dodging, so that makes it even harder to deal 200 damage in 2 seconds. Then, on top of that, even if you are able to damage the shield enough to get rid of it, then at most you'll save, I don't know, maybe a second or a half a second off the shield. The gain, the benefit that you get out of it is minimal, because you've taken the duration from, let's say, 2 seconds to 1 second or 1.5 seconds because it took time to deal that damage. And then you're punished for it because you give the Zarya a charge, and she does more damage, and a charged Zarya is a force to be reckoned with. There's nothing that players can do to counter the shield, and the one semi-counter that exists punishes you for countering it. Like, let's apply Zarya's bubble principle to other abilities in the game, okay? Okay, so Bastion in Sentry mode has a little power core on the back, where if you shoot it, it deals extra damage. That's how he's meant to be countered. So imagine every time you shot that power core, a little laser popped up out of the back of Bastion and shot you for like 30 or 50 damage. That would be punishing you for countering that ability. So the incentive you would have would be to not shoot the power core, especially if you're at low health. Another example is Roadhog's heal. A good counter to that is Ana's grenade. Imagine if Ana's grenade stopped healing for everyone, but for some special reason, whenever Roadhog tries to heal and he's being affected by an enemy and a grenade, he gets a super speed boost. Now, in that case, Ana would be encouraged to not counter that ability because she gets punished for it, because she's helping out the enemy Roadhog. And that's basically what happens here. The only way to counter this ability, the one and only way to counter it, is by damage. And if you counter the ability in that way, you're punished for it. So what ends up happening, because the game punishes you for doing what I guess you're supposed to do, you're actually incentivized to just wait. That's the best counter to Zarya's shield now. You just sit there and twiddle your thumbs and wait for 2 seconds for the bubble to go down. And that creates an entirely different problem in that the way that you counter this ability, which isn't even a real counter by the way, it's just the least harmful option, is to do nothing, which is non-interactive and boring. Every other ability in the game has an active counter. If Mei ice walls, you could jump over it, you could climb over it. If Pharah flies into the air, you can hook her. You can snipe her down because she has no cover, right? There are things that you can actively do as the player to stop the enemy player from performing well with this ability. But that's just not the case with Bubble. The only thing you can do, the best thing you can do, is just sit there and do nothing. And if you do that, the Zarya has still won, because either they absorb 200 damage, or they make it so that you don't deal any damage to them for 2 seconds. So for Zarya, the bubble is a win-win situation. And if you actually hurt the bubble and don't take it down all the way, it's a double win for the Zarya. So there's just nothing in the game that can counter this bubble. And this is, like, normally that wouldn't be a big deal. If this were like, League of Legends or a MOBA or some other game, that wouldn't be a problem. But this is Overwatch, a game built around the core fundamental concept of countering. If a Widowmaker is destroying your team, what you're supposed to do is switch to Winston, switch to Genji, some sort of mobile character who can get close to Winston or get close to Widowmaker and destroy her. But if a Zarya is destroying your team, there's just not a reliable counter, because there's no reliable counter to the bubble. And in my opinion, the best way to solve this, the thing that's critically missing from Overwatch, is some sort of cleanse effect. In fact, this would solve, I think, a lot of other problems that people have with Overwatch, in that a lot of the debuffs and buffs can be really frustrating to play with. So imagine you had a character, let's probably support, because cleansing fits support characters really well, who had a gun kind of like Ana that hurts enemies and helps allies. And whenever you shot an enemy, it gets rid of all of their buffs. So if someone has a Zarya shield, it gets rid of the Zarya shield. Similarly, if you shoot an ally, it gets rid of all their debuffs. So Ana Sleep Dart, Discord Orb, McCree Flashbang, Mei Freeze, things like that. Hit them with it and the debuff is removed. I think that is a very clever and simple and very effective solution to this problem. It would allow for a lot of other counterplays, like if a Mei is destroying your team by freezing everyone, you could switch this character and purge away all of the frozen characters so that they can run to safety and escape the Mei. So that's effective counterplay that fits within the core principle of counterplay and countering abilities. I'm not really sure how this ability would work with ultimates. Being able to purge like Primal Rage on Winston or a Nano Boost is a little bit strong, so this purge effect might be best suited for like basic abilities only. I'm not really sure. That's sort of a balance thing. Maybe instead of purging ultimates, it could just decrease the duration by half a second or something like that. I'm not really sure. That's sort of a balance thing that can be worked out later. But until this purge effect exists, until Zarya's bubble has a reliable counter, I will continue to believe that Zarya is the worst designed character in the game, because she's the only character in the game without a reliable counter. So to top it all off, as if the bubble wasn't bad enough on its own, Zarya is also quite effective at the two most reliable tank busters in the game, Reaper and Zenyatta. All tanks rely on very close range to deal damage, so Reaper, as the highest close damage dealer in the game, will just close the gap and just out damage the tanks and kill them. However, Zarya has like medium to long range effectiveness, so a Zarya can just constantly backtrack and run away from the Zarya while keeping him a distance with the beam and poke him down until the Reaper has to Wraith form away. And this is all while gaining charge because Reaper's not going to be able to reliably bust through that Zarya shield at mid range. And if a Reaper manages to catch a Zarya at close range, that is instant 0 to 50 charge because he will burn through the shield. Also, Zenyatta relies on Discord Orb to cut down the health of tanks, but the Zarya shield purges the bubble, so that doesn't work at all. So normally you rely on Reaper and Zenyatta to counter tanks, and if Zarya is giving you a problem, you can't really rely on Reaper and Zenyatta because she like almost directly counters both those characters. So let me know what you think about this. Let me know if you agree or disagree. There are a couple sort of discussion points. Number one, do you agree that Zarya's bubble doesn't have a reliable counter? Number two, since Zarya's bubble doesn't have a reliable counter, do you think that Zarya herself does not have a reliable counter? Now, I realize, of course, that there are some heroes who are more effective than others at fighting Zarya. For example, Pharah is pretty good at taking on Zarya just because Zarya has a lot of trouble actually hitting Pharah. But, you know, even then, Pharah can't really deal with the shield because no one can deal with the shield. Number three, do you agree that Zarya's bubble is the only ability that violates Overwatch's core principle of countering and counterplay because it doesn't have a counter? So let me know your thoughts. Thanks for watching. Dabacab out.